Hello and welcome to Alan History Nerd. In this video I'm looking at peace and conflict between 446 and 431 BC. So this is part of the Peloponnesian War. Well, kind of a bit of a break in the middle of it really, but we're going to have a look at all the different aspects and what happens. So the context of what's going on. So we were told by Thucydides when the Delian League was formed that Athens was extracting about 460 talents worth of tribute from its allies. These were being paid to the treasury on Delos. Therefore, it is the Delian League, and therefore this money is being held essentially for all members of the league. This shifts as we go through time. So in 454, 543, the treasury was moved to Athens. We've talked about this in Diodorus 12.38.2. And a tribute quota list appeared in Athens. There were annual inscriptions on stone giving 1/60th of the tribute offered by each city to the dedicated treasury of Athena. And these stone tablets are kind of very useful archaeological evidence on the nature and shifting position in the Delian League, in particular kind of the rise in status of Athens. The first 15 lists were all recorded on the sides of a 3.5 metre high stone pillar known as the first stele. The next 8 were on smaller pillars, and then after that they seem to be recorded on separate blocks of stone. There is a kind of a series of the amount that Athens is kind of extracting from its allies. In 431 we are standing at 600 talents being paid to Athens annually. So we're seeing a considerable rise. It gets even higher later on, and the evidence of that is in Thucydides, book 2.13. So we can see that maybe Athens' relationship with the members of the Delian League is shifting a bit. Partly on one side we're seeing Athens increasing dominance, and on the other side maybe reasons for some of these allies to become unhappy with the extra money that's been taken away from them by Athens. On the last video, we looked at the rebellions in Euboea and Megara. The Euboean revolt was put down, and one of the results of this was the Chalkist decree. This source demonstrates the movement from the Delian League to the Athenian Empire. So it's continuing that same context we've just looked at. So one part of it was tribute, another part of it is this Chalkist decree. And what we can see here that Athens is demanding obedience, that its previous allies are now essentially subservient to it. So the Chalcidians were expected to swear this oath that they would not revolt from the people of Athens by any means or device whatsoever, neither in word or deed, nor will they obey anyone who does revolt, and if anyone revolts, they will denounce him to the Athenians, and will pay the Athenians whatever tribute they want and that you agree to, and will be the best and fairest ally and able to be and defend the Athenian people. I will obey the Athenian people. I think the last bit's really strong, isn't it? They're going to obey the Athenian people. So Athens is a democracy. The people make the decisions, but the other members of the Delian League are expected to just kind of swear decrees that they will essentially accept what Athens tells them and negotiate tribute with them, but essentially, ultimately, they will pay it. And not only will they not revolt, that they will help Athens suppress any rebellion. Again, this suggests that Athens is worried about rebellion, and maybe this grip, whilst in some ways tightening, the fact that as it tightens more and more, that we're going to get kind of allies trying to escape from that grip. So the A-level specification for ancient history tells us in this bit that we need to understand the peace of 446, the balance of power outlined in the peace of 446 and the relations between Athens and Sparta. We need to look at the role of Corinth and Sparta in the revolt of Samos, and the events leading up to and causes of the outbreak of war in 431. This last bit is particularly important because it's also the area of the second of the two key debates which can make the 20-mark question on the exam. So on that 20-mark section you could either be asked essentially why the Greeks win the Persian War in 479, this one, which is why war breaks out in 431, and then the final one is explaining Athens' defeat in 404. So this is a really important part of the spec, because not only have you got it for the general understanding of the chronology and the 30 markers and all that, but it also becomes the focus of one of the potential debates where you might do that 20 marker, where you're looking at the historian's view. So there's a slightly odd event in 446 where the Spartan king Pleistonax invades Attica, but then just kind of stopped and turned round. So what was going on? Was he bribed? Thucydides, book 5.16 tells us that he was banished on suspicion of having accepted a bribe to retreat from Attica. He's also accused of having used bribery of the prophetess of Delphi to bring about his later restoration in Sparta. So there seems to be something dodgy going on here. I mean, they march into Attica, they seem to be making good progress, and then they just turn around and go back. Now, Plutarch in Pericles 23.1-2 claims it was Pericles that bribed him to withdraw his troops. And that kind of makes sense. There's lots of accusations in some of the sources about Pericles being maybe a little light-fingered when it came to coming to all the money that there was washing around Athens at the time, and they might well have decided this was good use of it. So rather than spending money on the fighting, just bribe the guy who's attacking and get him to go away. And he will prove to be very important later on when we look at the piece in 421. So what are the claims about the piece of 446? Well, this is what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to last for 30 years. It doesn't, but that was the terms, that it would last for 30 years. Athens was to give up its Megarian harbours of Nicosia and Pegaea, along with Trojan and Archaea in the Peloponnese. Each side was allowed to keep its allies, so the Peloponnesian League can stay intact, the Delian League can stay intact. So if any state has got allies, that stays as it was. No ally could revolt and join the other side. Obviously, they see this as a potential way that Athens and Sparta can be pulled into a conflict if a Spartan ally leaves Sparta and joins Athens, or vice versa. So this is the idea of keeping the big guys out of any smaller revolts, and to try and keep, again, their leagues in place. Neutral states had the freedom to ally with either side, so essentially you couldn't complain if a neutral state came and joined the other side. That wouldn't be a reason to go to war. Argos was excluded from the treaty. It had a separate peace with Sparta at this point in time. Arbitration was to happen before any armed attack if one side wanted it. So you couldn't just go attacking the other side. You had to offer arbitration and try and sort out the problems first. Again, seems very sensible. There's a bit of confusion about what's going on with Aegina. It later claimed it had been wronged by the treaty. This is in Thucydides, book 1.67. And then there's a list of allies, and that was annexed and added to the treaty. So we've got a fairly sensible looking piece for a very ambitiously long period of time. So that's with everything that's put in place in 446. The balance of power outlined in the piece of 446 and relations between Athens and Sparta is kind of one of the big things that comes out of this. Now, it does show there's been a kind of defined shift in the power dynamic of Greece. And the big bit about this is Sparta is saying, right, Athens, we accept your dominance in the Aegean. So all these places in the Aegean that are allied to you, they remain allied to you. They cannot swap over to us. And essentially they are recognising the superiority of the Athenian navy and therefore the Athenian control of all the sea routes that go through the Aegean. Obviously, this not only gave a nod towards the new strength of Athenian fighting power, but also its increased economic strength as a city-state. And it's got the dominance of the sea routes and the trade. It's also got all this incoming tribute. And in a way, there's good reason for Sparta at this point to be quite wary of Athens, and why making peace with Athens seems to make a lot of sense. Now, linked to the payment of tribute, Sparta also recognised the hegemony of Athens over its allies, in particularly the sense of its imperial nature, by agreeing to a clause that forbade defections. So Sparta was essentially agreeing that Athens controlling those who were part of the League and refusing to offer the likes of Megara and Euboea a way out. And that's often what would happen. And again, you can see why Sparta and Athens want to avoid this, where any city-state that they control starts to not like the terms and things they're being controlled under, then they just go to the other one. And this potentially causes a massive war. Now, there were internal elements of Sparta that disagreed with the terms of the peace, but the greatest pressure, according to Thucydides, comes from the ever-vengeful Corinth. The debate at Sparta and Thucydides' work documents and supports the complaints of Corinth's delegates, who accused Sparta of weakening and bowing to Athenian power. Something I don't think the Spartans are going to like to hear. And again, if we go back to the earlier period, the period of the Persian War, this idea of Spartan hegemony and the great Spartan army, and the idea that Sparta would kind of bow to the strength of another side, it seemed unlikely. But that seems to be part of the implication of this peace in 446. And Corinth, in particular, through this period, doesn't believe that Sparta does enough in standing up to Athens. And we see this to an extent, but maybe showing maybe a bit more nuance in it all when we see the revolt in Samos in 440. Now, so two of Athens' allies, Samos and Miletus, were at war. Miletus, the weaker of the two, asks Athens for help. Athens is got a free hand. They're both its allies, so it removed the oligarchy in Samos and replaced it with democracy and left the garrison behind. Later on, actually, in the story, Samos will be seen as a kind of great bastion of democracy. So it's interesting at this point that it's being imposed on them by Athens. The oligarchs sought help from the Persian satrap of Lydia, and they forced out the Athenian garrison, but Athens defeated them following, again, naval encounters and sieges. Naval encounters and sieges are things that Athens are good at. Now, there is a debate in the Peloponnesian League about helping Samos. Again, this would break the terms of the treaty of 446. But although Sparta essentially voted for war, Corinth and other members voted to block this. So again, we've got this idea of Sparta not maybe being full control of its league, of its alliance, and with the kind of parliamentarian nature of the voting system at this point, where essentially the Spartans voted, decided whether they wanted war, but this has to be agreed by their allies. Again, shows that element as being really important. Now, Corinth will use the fact that they prevented war at this point when they have some of their complaints against Athens going forward. In the next part, I'm going to look at a load of different events that kind of lead up to the outbreak of war in 431. As I said earlier in the video, this period is really important, and again, we need to know these different events and what happened, because you might in the exam be looking at an account by a modern historian who's pointing out that some of these are more important than others, or the most significant, or debating the role the different parts play in some other way. So it's really important that we've got a kind of a firm grasp of what goes on. In Epidemius and Corcycrea, we see a kind of a really important part of this. So Epidemius is on the northwest coast of the Adriatic, so the opposite side of Greece to the Aegean, and was a colony of the island of Corcycrea, which is now Corfu. I, for one, wish that the sources just called it Corfu, which I can say more easily. But anyway, Corcycrea at this point, it is what is now Corfu again. Corfu, or Corcycrea as it was at the time, was itself a colony of Corinth. So we've got kind of layers upon layers of this. So we've got this city-state up on the Adriatic coast, which is a colony of Corcycrea, and Corcycrea is a colony of Corinth. So we've kind of got the different stages. In 435, a conflict erupts in Epidemius, as a group there wanted democracy. They asked Corcyrea for help, and Corcyrea did nothing, so they asked Corinth. The slightly odd thing in this is that Corinth is an oligarchy. So you've got some people who want democracy asking an oligarchy for help. The Corinthians decided they will. Now, this seems to be about Corinth wanting to expand and grow its own power. But it doesn't go very well. They're defeated by the Corcyreans in a naval battle. Now, Corcyrea has a strong navy. Now, this is important because this is going to catch the attention of Athens. Now, Corinth prepared a fresh attack on Corcyrea. Corcyrea is a neutral state. They asked Athens for an alliance. So Corcyrea is not in the treaty. It's not It's not a direct member of the Peloponnesian League, though it is the colony of a city-state, which is. There's a little bit of a grey area here. And the Corcyreans say to Athens, right, we should have an alliance. We are a good naval power. War with Sparta is inevitable. You're much better off if the ships are on our ships on your side than they're on their side. Also, we're asking for democracy. Corinth is outraged and sent an embassy to Athens. We see this in Thucydides 1.40 to 141. And particularly kind of complaining that they stood up for Athens about what was going on in Samos when the Spartans had voted for war. Now Athens ignores all of this and makes a defensive alliance with Corcyrea and helps to defend them against Corinthian attack in 433, and the details of that are in Thucydides 1.55. And this gives, as Thucydides tells us, Corinth her first cause for war against Athens. So the big problem here is between Athens and Corinth rather than directly between Athens and Sparta, but we can see Athens' ambition in terms of adding another naval city-state, powerful naval city-state to its alliance. We also see the issue of democracy here. Again, and then it's arguable how much blame here lies with Corinth. Is Corinth really being overly aggressive, or is Athens sticking its nose in where it's not supposed to? The next event is at Portidaea. Now, so Portidaea sits on the three-pronged peninsula of the sea, and again, you might remember this from earlier part of the course. This is the bit where we see in the early Persian expedition the failure of the navy and them being eaten by sea monsters. It is also the bit later in the Persian Wars where we see Xerxes building the canal to avoid going around the outside. So it's on the north coast of the Aegean. Portidaea was an Athenian subject state, but it was also a Corinthian colony. And again, we can see how some of the nuances of the treaty were maybe not particularly that strong. It's probably because the treaty is really between Sparta and Athens, and Corinth is not the as big a player as maybe it wanted it to be. Athens feared, particularly following the earlier events of Corcyrea, that a Corinthian-inspired revolt in Portidaea. And so they ordered them to pull down their walls. I mean, there is a bit of irony in this. So Athens, who'd stood firm earlier against Spartan demands, they pulled down their walls, are now demanding that somebody else pulls theirs down. And they kind of, we get the Portidaeans going to Sparta and kind of going, look, if Athens attacks us and does this, will you attack Attica? And the Spartan M4s, their magistrates, seem to agree to this. The Portidaeans revolted. Corinthians sent help. The Athenians lay siege to the city for 3 years, and Sparta did nothing. So again, I mean, Corinthian anger you can see here probably going in two directions. One of them is towards Athens, which it's seeing as an aggressor and interfering in places where it believes it shouldn't, and bullying smaller, weaker states. And on the other side, you can see Corinthian anger going towards Sparta, where it's going, right, you guys are supposed to be leading this alliance. Why aren't you doing anything to help us? Now, you could argue that Athens is doing no wrong because Phorcea is a subject state of Athens for which it has a free hand, according to the treaty. The complication there is Corinth, the fact that it is a Corinthian colony. So is it Athens that's overstepping the mark? Is it Corinth? And what exactly is Sparta up to? I mean, it's a long way from Sparta. I think maybe their ability to do anything about Phorcea is fairly limited, and they're worried about the consequences if they invade Attica. So the next part we've got is Megara, in particular the Megarian decree. Now, Megara was excluded by Athens from trading in all ports in the Athenian Empire. We're told about this in Thucydides, book 1.67. And this was done because Megara killed an envoy, which is a big no-no, and also Megara had changed sides and been supplying ships to Corinth. Now, Sparta wanted Athens to revoke the Megarian decree to avoid war. I see this in Thucydides, book 1.139. And Athens is kind of going, we don't think we've really done anything wrong. They did stuff wrong. We imposed a kind of a punishment for it. Pericles, leading man in Athens at the time, strongly opposed revoking the decree, and again the details of his speech against this you can see in Thucydides, book 1.140. And this leads to Plutarch blaming Pericles for the outbreak of war. And he says, everyone blames Pericles for the fact it was not overturned. And this is in Plutarch's Pericles, part 31. So Plutarch says Pericles did this to shift attention from a friend's embezzlement trial and from his own actions with Aspasia, which were seen as very scandalous at the time. The impact on Megara and the intentions are not fully clear. So was this just affecting the wealthy in Megara who involved in the trade? Was this hurting the Megarian people as a whole? Is Athens again being a bully, or is Athens well within its remit in terms of the treaty and its own powers in going, right, no, the Megarians have done wrong, they deserve to be punished? In Astrophanes' play, the Achaeans, the suggestion is that the Megarians were stealing Athenian prostitutes who Aspasia then was pimping out. Now, that bit is certainly not true, but it does highlight the fact that there was lots of scandal around Aspasia and Pericles, and lots of seemingly scandalous stuff. So again, we're seeing here, right, is it Athens that is being overly aggressive? Is Sparta failing to act? Or is actually, according to the terms of the treaty, is everything absolutely fine? And this causes tension, but maybe shouldn't be seen as something quite as big as it was. Again, something that historians are likely to get their teeth into in terms of the impact of the Megarian decree. It is quite a big deal. Megara is a trading state, and the Athenian alliance controls almost all of the Aegean. So it is a big deal. Again, whether it was deserved or not is maybe another matter. There are then some further events in the Aegina and the Ambracian Gulf. So in Aegina, the Aegeans were unhappy about being subject to Athens. Aegina believed it should be independent and brought its complaint to Sparta. So again, we can see a sparking by a smaller state into potentially a wider war. In the Ambracian Gulf, again, Corinth is upset, which seems to be mainly what Corinth spends all its time doing, is being upset. And it's upset with Athens, who gave military support to the Amphilicians and the Achaeans in this area, which was under Corinthian influence. So again, I don't know whether this is just, we go, well, this is all Corinth. Corinth just stops whinging and moaning and looking at problems, or whether we kind of go, Athens is being aggressive, it's expanding, it's imperialistic, it's the bully, and it's sticking its nose in where it shouldn't. So we now then get what's known as the Corinthian complaint, and we've seen lots of complaining by the Corinthians, and this is kind of wrapping it all together. And this first bit is a quote from Thucydides, book 1, section 69, We know that there are paths by which Athenian aggression travels, and how insidious is its progress. Your bluntness of perception prevents you from noticing her. You see but do not care to interfere. You Spartans of all the Hellenes are alone, inactive. So the Corinthians are complaining, and they are complaining to Sparta, going, look at what Athens is getting up to. All the stuff that we've just been looking at is doing all this stuff, is super aggressive. Everybody can see that Athens has been super aggressive and is breaking the treaty, and you are doing nothing. So Corinth has turned on Sparta for its failure to stand up to Athens and protect members of the Peloponnesian League, including itself. Now, Athens sends a delegation to Sparta to defend their imperialism. We see this in Thucydides, book 1 to 175 to 177. King Archidenius warns against war, but Sparta votes for war. Now, Thucydides tells us he identified what was needed to defeat Athens: a navy, Persian support, and Athenian allies to be revolting. Now, this isn't the case at this point in the 430s. It will be later on. So again, we can see the king here being quite wise and foreshadowing the eventual way that Athens will be defeated. In the second assembly, so the one of the rest of the Peloponnesian League, the Corinthians reiterated their complaint and won the day, and it's war. So the bit here we can see that, I mean, there's an interesting bit in that book 1, 75 to 77. That bit where Athens defends itself is quite interesting. It's kind of like, yeah, no, we're allowed to. Imperialism's fine. And we can see, well, how much blame are we attaching to Corinth? How much blame are we attaching to Athens? Sparta then goes and as the terms of the treaty suggest, tries to offer some terms of peace to avoid war. So they sent a delegation to Athens offering peace, and they said, right, if you will renounce your empire, and very notably in this wording, give Greece its freedom. Remember, the Persian War was fought by Sparta and Athens and the other Greek states to maintain their freedom from Persia. At this point, what the Spartans are doing is kind of going, Athens, you're the new Persia. You have enslaved the rest of Greece. You need to give them their freedom. Pericles leads the argument to reject the Spartan offer. We can see this in Thucydides, book 1. Sections 140 to 141. He defends the Megarian decree, claims the Spartans have not sought proper arbitration. They've just gone and made a ridiculous demand. And again, the treaty says they can have all their empire, so they shouldn't be expected to give it up. And also we see here this growing confidence in Athens, and Pericles believes Athens could win a war with Sparta. And he points to Athenian naval power in financial strength, and that Sparta will have difficulty fighting a prolonged war. He also argues essentially war is inevitable. Again, this is in Thucydides, book 1, sections 141 through to 144. So Pericles is going into this very confident, and you can see why maybe Athens has brought in loads of tribute. It has grown in its power. Sparta has very much been on the back foot in all of this. So maybe not a delusional statement from Pericles. Right, I hope that's been useful for you. There will be more videos coming up covering more of the Peloponnesian War, along with lots of other stuff. There's loads of stuff on the channel, not only on ancient history, but on early modern and modern history as well. And there's also, if you want to get bang up to date, loads of politics stuff on there as well. So please subscribe. Thank you very much for watching.